All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Psychedelic Light Show review. I'm your host, Steve Pavlovsky. I'm here with my co-host, Chris Zamartich. And today we got a really cool guest. We got Andrew Bernstein from Crimson Madness Light Show. And Andrew's got a really cool story. He's been in the thick of it. He was at the first acid tests. He was actually at the first Dead Show with the Warlocks. He was also part of the Historic Light Show Guild strike. And he also has a book out called California Slim: The Music, the Magic, and the Madness. So yeah, Andrew's got a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. We're really excited to have him here today. So, all right, Chris.
Yeah, so this is episode 13, and we're featuring the Crimson Madness Light Show on this one, which is Andrew. Okay, so let me go and get this thing rolling here and share. And there we go. Okay. So Andrew, take it away.
Well, I'm Andrew Bernstein. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I really dig what you're doing. I was in the thick of it, and I wrote a book about it. I knew I was going to have to write this book pretty early on, and I knew it was going to be a difficult task. I spent 10 years at it, collected all the posters, all the pictures, and it was a labor of love. People ask me, what's your book about? The short answer is it starts with me and Jerry Garcia as teenagers and Jerry teaching me how to pick. And it ends with me and Willie Nelson making a movie together called Honeysuckle Rose, A Song for You. Now, if you have a wide open imagination and you use those as bookends, you can imagine the book is full of a lot of glory, a lot of fun, a little bit of bad behavior, and more than anything else, a love of the music and the times and the social revolution in music, literature, and art.
Awesome, man.
Okay, so why don't you talk about your meeting Jerry Garcia? And
well, I had two loves in my life when I was a little kid: trucks and rock and roll. In '56, when Elvis came out, my brother bought the first Elvis record, and trucks had to take a back seat to rock and roll. And I was listening to Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all the greats. I knew at a very young age that music was going to play a pivotal role in my life. I wanted to learn how to play when I was 13 or 14, and the banjo was my choice. Palo Alto was a pretty small community at that time, and there was only one banjo teacher. And he had a reputation as being pretty good, and he played locally. I showed up for my first lesson at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and the guy in goatee and horn rimmed glasses came out and said, "Are you my 7 o'clock?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm Jerry Garcia, follow me." That began a long relationship with Jerry as a friend and as a musician. And lo and behold, he would go on to become one of the most famous guitarists. So he came in and out of my life for many years. The rest of the guys, Kreutzmann, who's down below, that's Billy, went to school with him from 4th grade on. So he was one of really close friends. He was the guy who drummed in the bands at Sock Hops in junior high school. And Pigpen on the right was 2 years ahead of me in school. And he was a hard guy. He was a little greaser guy, but he also had a lot of soul. And his father was a disc jockey at K-Soul Radio in Oakland, black station. So Pigpen grew up similar to a lot of musicians, being heavily, heavily influenced in his life by the African-American community. So that was the nexus of the band. And what a lot of people don't know is that Kreutzmann invited Garcia to join his band.
Oh, wow.
And Garcia, and that's true, and Billy ran the Grateful Dead. He wasn't a hippie ever. And I've known Bill almost my entire life. And we watched it grow and I used to hang out at Dana Morgan's music studio. Bob Weir eventually came in, but Bill was the one who said, "I'd like to start a band, Jerry, and I'd like you to be the guitarist." So little backstory. The fellow to the left is John Dawson. And John's another Palo Alto guy, and he started the New Riders of the Purple Sage and wrote a lot of great songs. But he and Jerry were running buddies from a very young age in Palo Alto. And I used to run my horses on John's father's property. John's father was a very famous Hollywood producer and lived up in the hills in Palo Alto. So we were just kind of a group of free spirits very early in the 60s, 62, 63, 64. And then one day, Billy came to school and told us our senior year in March of 65, hey, you guys, we're going to finally have our first gig at Magoo's Pizza Parlor. We don't have a name. We're going to go with the Warlocks. If you don't come, we won't have an audience. And Bobby Weir did the same thing at MA High School. So there were 20 of us there that first night. And in my
I'm gonna go with this acid test poster. Okay, is that cool?
Yeah, sure. So that's a little bit about my relationship with Garcia. Once the Dead became the Dead in 66, 67, they hooked up with some people in West Menlo Park, who it turned out was Ken Kesey. And this was actually 65. And they started, there was something going on there, actors and musicians and the Grateful Dead who were just still getting their feet. Enter Timothy Leary and LSD, which came about through a relationship with Ken Kesey and Leary. It was introduced. They started taking their West Menlo Park meetings to another level and bringing in lights and bringing in the Dead were developing their own sound. This is very early on. Mm-hmm. So there were these acid tests and nobody really knew what they were other than we'd get these invitations and show up and there'd be Kool-Aid. And it was the famous electric Kool-Aid. We didn't know. And then the pandemonium, not the pandemonium, but the lights would start. And the lights were an integral part of it. And the Dead would play. And they became known as the acid tests. You had to be invited. Some were open to the public. But nobody knew you drank the Kool-Aid and that you didn't know it was LSD. You didn't have any preconceived notion. And they were unbelievable. This particular poster Ken Babbs did, he was one of the pranksters. Yeah. He did it on the back of a bag down in Santa Cruz. And nobody knows where the original is. I got a copy of it. Mm-hmm. And you have to know the light shows this is the birthplace of what we came to know as the psychedelic experience. Everything has a beginning. Now, the man to the right is Owsley. Owsley came to the scene. He was a Berkeley chemist student, brilliant guy. And I got to know Owsley very well. He built, besides being the guy who started making LSD, and he fell right in with the Dead. He came from a very wealthy family in Kansas, and he had money. So he was able to get the Grateful Dead from the Palo Alto stages and the acid test. They moved to LA, and they really developed who they became, and Owsley paid for it. He dropped out of school and became the acid manufacturer. It was legal for years. So nobody was breaking the law. The thing about Owsley was he was very smart, and he made the first major batches of, Orange Sunshine, Blue Cheer, all the Purple Haze, and his pills had the Owsley stamp on them, and you could trust them. They were real. You could take a half, a quarter. It wasn't about taking as much as you could. And when they moved back to San Francisco, they were the Grateful Dead. And Owsley built the wall of sound. He became a brilliant sound engineer. Many of the early tapes were all done by Owsley. And when I started producing Jerry's sideshows a little bit later at my nightclub, I got to know Owsley as a sound guy. And we became very close friends because when Jerry would do these side gigs, Owsley would do the sound. He was later asked to no longer go to Grateful Dead shows because he was so manic, because he was so smart, because his mind never stopped. and it just became too much. He was always their friend and always stayed close, but a brilliant man, and had such an influence on the whole evolution of what we have come to know as psychedelic music. I don't want to overemphasize LSD. It played a role.
Right.
Using it, with an open mind, but common sense was always the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it wasn't, with him, it wasn't, just making LSD. It was also, a lot of sound and audio pioneering was done by him. And, and then him being able to like fund the band and all that is also, integral to, to the Grateful Dead. So he was an extremely influential person.
Well, he introduced stereo to rock and roll, got it away from mono. I'm going to go to this next slide with Andrew when he was a young man and his book right there.
Yeah.
If we go,
but before we actually go on to the book, I was hoping to ask you, since you were there and very little is kind of known about the light show at the acid tests, what, we really know it from like, let's say like the electric Kool-Aid acid test and a couple of things here and there, but can you expand upon, what you remember the light shows actually consisting of and being like?
Well, that's a great question, Steve. I didn't go to, I went to two acid tests, and to be honest with you, I wasn't comfortable. I was young. I still didn't know exactly whether this whole thing was going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dosed at the one in Palo Alto. I got dosed early, and those light shows were pretty darn magical, I have to tell you. I mean, we didn't, these guys, especially Neil Cassidy, who was the character from On the Road. He was the real Dean Moore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And everything that you read and hear about him is true.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, I'll touch on his wake at the Fillmore, but with the Dead and with Crimson Madness. But those light shows were more, since we didn't have a preconceived idea, and I didn't know I would end up doing light shows at that time. But they were not what we have come to know as with color wheels and slides. They were more explosive, I guess is the only word I can use.
Yeah.
Unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my understanding is there were a lot of strobes going on and sort of more like flashing lights and that sort of light show. Not really as much projected light or imagery, right. But light sources kind of emitting from themselves and
to be honest with you, it freaked me out.
I can imagine. I mean,
strobes have never been my best friend anyway. Yeah. But Cassidy was everywhere, and he was hanging sheets, and he I mean, the guy.
So the pranksters were, like Cassidy was actually putting lights up and all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was all, and the more light shows they did, the more sophisticated it became. And my understanding is that some of the last ones, they were actually getting into some fairly sophisticated. But I was at the early shows,
Yeah, right. So still developing.
Yeah, but it was too much of a sensory input for me.
I can imagine.
Well, in Rock Scully's book, he talks about this tower that Kesey built, and they were all up on the tower, shining lights down and with microphones. Hey, you over there? You're seeing yourself.
I mean,
it was too much. But it was, just as I like to tell people, the award shows that you see before COVID, of course, but the big glitzy Hollywood produced shows were a direct result of the light shows of San Francisco. I mean, they ripped us off for everything and just, magnified it by powers of 10 and digitized it. And those shows at the Fillmore were an outgrowth of what they were doing at the acid tests. It's a straight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's should we go to this crazy Crimson Madness picture?
So we did mention the book, right? This is your book.
Yeah, this is a spot on the book right now. People want to tune in or tune out, but yeah, give a little promotion where they can get this book.
Well, you can get it anywhere. You can. I prefer to have your order. It sold 20,000 copies, by the way. I'm very
Oh,
proud.
congratulations.
Yeah,
I
great.
get, it took 10 years to write, and there's 100 pictures and posters throughout it. And when I said that, it starts with me and Jerry Garcia and ends with me and Willie Nelson, they're bookends. I'm still very close with Willie and the boys. I toured with him for 3 years. And I brought a little bit of the San Francisco magic to a bunch of wild Texans, is the way I put it. So, the first 2/3 of the book is about my life in rock and roll in San Francisco. Personal experiences with all the artists. They were all friends because I promoted them. It's not who I knew and who I got high with. I worked with them. I produced shows. I did lights. We did management. We did local tours around the state. We were a busy bunch of guys, and I ended up with Willie through placing a bus driver with asleep at the wheel, who later became Willie's very first bus driver. And he told Willie all about this guy in California named Andrew Bernstein, and Willie quickly named me California Slim when he met me and invited me along for the ride for 2.5 years. I was kind of the guy that helped keep everybody in line at Willie's behest. So he's a dear friend, a wonderful man, and that's what the book's about.
All right, so let's see. Do you want to go with the van and the house and your first gig with Crimson Madness? Does that sound good?
Sure.
All right, here we go.
All
There
right.
you go.
So that vehicle on the left is a one of a kind. It's a 1942 Chevrolet military built,
Oh,
but it wasn't used for the military. It wasn't in a certain way. The way that truck came about is dualies on the back, all steel, diamond plate steel on the back. It had a huge, thick plank on the floor, and it was from the Castro Valley Fire Department. Castro Valley is over by Hayward, which is in the East Bay. And during World War II, early in the war, military planes used to land at the Hayward Airport, which is still there, which is out on the mud, used to be out on the mud shoals of the San Francisco Bay in the East Bay. And they'd have blackouts back then because it was during wartime. And a big military plane crashed out on the mud banks, and they didn't have any way to fight the fire and no lights. This became a generator truck, which was built to power lights and pressure to the trucks should the power go out. That's what its life was. I got it from the Castro Valley Fire Department when they retired it. And it was a great truck. It was right out of the comic books.
mm-hmm.
And
It's beautiful.
a beautiful truck. And that carried our equipment. That carried Crimson Madness until we retired the light show. And get a lot in.
So who were the members of Crimson Madness?
Well, Crimson Madness was started by a guy named Raleigh Grogan. And he was a high school friend of mine. And our junior year, the Marine recruiter showed up in their dress blues to Palo Alto High School and basically said, hey, you guys, if you get these blue suits, it's a real chick magnet. And we were all stupid enough to believe it. I wasn't, but a whole bunch of my friends joined. This was before the Vietnam War took off. Or a bunch of my friends joined the Marines just because of that. The blues. And
Oh God.
all I had to sign on the line that they would graduate from high school and 2 weeks later be Marines. And they all signed. Anyway, Raleigh was one of the ones that signed. The Marine Corps decided sometime in early '67 that they didn't need Raleigh Grogan. And he was asked to turn in his uniform. He'd been developing light shows in his apartment down in San Diego, and this is stories in my book. But he came back ready to take over San Francisco with his ideas on how to do a light show, which he had no experience. So there was he and two of his Marine Corps buddies, and they all came back with shaved heads. And Raleigh and I was a hippie, and I looked like a hippie. And Raleigh said, "We need you. We need you. We're not going to get anywhere." and we like you, and you know everybody, and that's how I came into it. And then a guy named Herb Pemberton from high school, Crazy Herb the Tweaker, who was better with nuts and bolts and screws, and then a couple of New Yorkers twins named David and David O'Neill and his brother John. We're very bright guys. And that was us. That was Crimson Madness. And we all came from different backgrounds. But that house in the top there, that's a house on Waverly Street in Palo Alto, had a great big basement. And we had plenty of room. And we were just raring to go. And we spent 2 years developing Crimson Madness. That little sign down the bottom is Addison Elementary School, which was built in the late 1890s and had a wonderful auditorium. And in order for us, it was right down the street from us, we cut a deal that we would do concerts in there, local concerts. So we hired local bands to play, really just so we could develop our light show.
Yeah.
And we did it for about a year, then started doing gigs at churches. Pretty soon had a production company.
There you go.
And we developed, here's one of our shows we did at the colleges, Mills College.
Yes.
And we hired an artist named Jake Pierre who did all the graphics. Fantastic. And he's the one that ended up doing, his body of work is phenomenal. Really great. And so that's how Crimson Madness came about. It was Raleigh's idea. He came up with the name. And we finally got an audition with Bill Graham.
Mm-hmm.
And we auditioned with Black Oak, Arkansas.
Let's talk about this Grateful Dead show. I think it happened in '69. Can we want to get to that?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Talk us about this one.
So this was before we were doing shows. I believe this is before we were doing shows, or right around the same time at the new Fillmore. The old Fillmore had closed.
Correct.
And there were, but in this whole group of people, we were kind of an expanded group. And we were part of this expanded group. There were some wealthy individuals who could afford to rent, family money usually. They could afford to rent the Fillmore and do a private show, invitation only. And this was one such show. And I prefer not to give the guy's name out just because it's
fine.
Old family.
That's
but
cool.
He was a deadhead and he loved our light show. And so he called us first and said, I want to book you guys to do this show with the Dead, but I haven't firmed it up yet with the Dead management, because dealing with the Dead management was like, a trip to outer space and back. But he eventually nailed it down. And he did the poster. He hired his own poster artist. And it was invitation only. And it was our first time to do a light show with our old friends. They really were. I mean, we grew up together. And they were now the Grateful Dead officially. And it was like old home week for us. And it was a great night. Some people think it was one of the Dead's best shows. Dick's Picks, as you mentioned.
Well, what's going on here is this Dick's Pick 16 right here, and everybody's mentioning that it is one of the best shows, and Dick picked it as a 16th pick. So it's also got that St. Stephen Dark Star, that kind of real experimental 69, before they went towards the country stuff. So it's really a progressive show. So you got really lucky to do that show. I mean, it's a famous, super famous show.
And this was 69, you said, right?
Yeah. November. Is it November? I believe so.
Yeah, it says November 7th and 8th.
Yeah, right.
So
go ahead. You ready to go to the next one?
Sure. That, by the way, that picture of Pigpen and Janice is one of my favorite pictures. And, I wasn't real good friends with Pig. I knew him all since junior high school, but, he didn't die from drinking. A lot of people think he did. He died from a very rare liver disease. It wasn't cirrhosis.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
No. The alcohol didn't do him any good, but it's not what killed him. He didn't abuse drugs. He wasn't a drugger. He was a drinker, but he was quite a guy. The longer he lived, the better I got to know him and appreciate what he brought. And again, he brought it because his dad raised him on soul music. He was a soulful, deeply soulful man. And when he met Janice, the two of them were like these two old souls, and they were so funny together, and they had such respect. Remember, I saw this stuff close up. This isn't what I speculated happened.
Yeah.
This was a coming together of these two wonderful souls, both left.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Pigpen was great musician, and it was kind of his band at first, I believe.
He was a big part of it.
Yeah, he was kind of, anyway, here's the next slide.
Yeah, it's just really cool that those two met each other. And
it is.
So there's Crimson Madness again. There's your poster artist.
Yeah,
and that's the same guy that made the other one, right?
Yeah. So this is Jake's work. And that's Jake playing the guitar. He was a surfer. He was from San Diego. And, look at the fish with the breathing apparatus on. Jake was very, very, very early on environmentally aware. He looked like a mountain man. I mean, he didn't look like a California surfer at this point. He's a musician, still a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the shows. This is when we were developing Crimson Madness. He developed that logo for our show down there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did several hundred shows before we ever hit the Fillmore. This was our production company. This was Cabrillo College down in Santa Cruz. And we would do these posters. Jake would do them. I just love them. And Together was a band that we produced. The organ player in Together was Corey Lirios, who later started and was a member of Pablo Cruz. Corey was with us from the very early days. So this was an example of like the Addison School. We did a poster, we did Crimson Madness, and that's how we developed our artwork.
Yeah, I like to ask. So, the kinds of gigs, outside of the Fillmore, we hear so much about the Fillmore and the famous venues, but, you did a substantial amount of work just, locally. And so, what kind of places were these? Were these like schools or, auditoriums or, parties?
We didn't do any parties, but we started at Addison School in Palo Alto. Then we developed this production company. We hired these bands like Together, Blue Mountain. And we approached junior colleges. This one was a junior college. We approached churches. And then we got on the circuit of junior colleges throughout Northern California. Then we went up to Tahoe. Chris, you said you were at some of those shows. We did gigs up there during the summers.
Yeah, it's called the Fun House, I think, in South Shore.
Fun House, South Shore. And then there was the Crystal Palace was on the...
the King's Beach Bowl was a
King's Beach Bowl. That's the one that we did. Remember,
okay,
remember.
Right, well, yeah, and the Dead did their album there, recorded one of their albums there.
Yeah, so we did, and we would be doing the Fillmore. It was in '69. We'd be doing the Fillmore and this. So we had a small crew up at Tahoe, and then we were doing the Fillmore, and those were great shows. We brought the Chambers Brothers. We were living in teepees, government teepees way out in the woods. And we did a show with the Chambers Brothers, and they had never tried LSD before. And we turned them on to LSD and changed their lives. Chambers still tells me when I see him, "Bro, you changed my life."
Lester, yeah.
And they came out, all dressed in the nines with leather boots. And we were living naked out in these teepees, And then we go in at night and do the shows. That's just kind of a side thing. But to your point, we did the junior colleges all throughout Northern California. We were taking it on the road.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, again, just a bunch of guys saying, we can do this. We can get it done.
And what kind of equipment were you guys using at this time?
We were using Kodak carousel projectors. I mean, we grew into the standard stuff for the most part. But it was only, we carried our own screens, which was my uncle had a darkening drape company, believe it or not, in Oakland. And I went to him and I said, Uncle Sid, I need some screens. I need some screens that we can travel with. And, I need them to be, not real shiny and somewhat opaque.
Yeah.
And we needed to have bars that we could pull together and take down. And he came up with the design. And so we could do outdoor areas with them, believe it or not. We did some down in Boulder Creek. It was all creative though, we go to the Navy surplus stores and buy these rheostats that sometimes we had to rebuild them. But we were traveling with carousels and overheads. We tried different overheads. We built an infinity machine, which I'll touch on a little bit, but we painted our own slides. We were very popular at the art store, at the hobby store in Palo Alto and Mountain View. And we got into video very later on. There was an outfit called Video Free America in Berkeley, which were some genius guys. That's the only way I can describe them, who hooked up with us, and Dr. Zarkov, Vince as well.
Oh, right.
And Dr. Zarkov, you ever heard that name?
I know from Flash Gordon.
Oh, okay, there was a light show out of Berkeley.
There was a light show called that, correct?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was Vince. Anyway, we were shooting 16 millimeter video feedback shapes and frequency controlled shapes right off of an old tube screen.
Oh, okay.
Then we would take those and loop them, and we take them down to Palo Alto to another place. They weren't looped yet, and he would dye the film colors.
Oh wow!
And
awesome. That's really cool.
It was so cool. And then we would loop them and shoot it again, so we had the mix of the colors, and then we could run them at the Fillmore on three different.
Wow.
We used them. We run 3 different 16 millimeter projectors with the loops, and this was for our center stuff. We didn't use it on the sides.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah,
we do
about that.
And we bring liquids in, and then we bring in. You ever see the 16 millimeter film of the horses running through the fire on the beach?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and then we bring that in. I tell you, we get standing ovations at the freaking Fillmore.
I've actually used that film. Okay, I'm going to go to your Fillmore show here.
So that's really cool that you guys, I mean, we're doing video feedback, even though it's, scanned and put on film and then colored. I mean, that'll process alone is really cool, but that you were actually projecting, video feedback, so early on. I mean, before you can even really, do video projections, you guys were doing that. That's really cool. I never heard of that being done like that, and especially so early on.
It was thanks to those guys at Video Free America.
Yeah.
They were all over. So this poster on the left, this was after our audition, and Bill told us that night of our audition how much he liked our show, how creative it was. And he said, you'll hear from us in 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of your show. And when the office called, they said, okay, you guys, here's your first date. It's going to be for B.B. King and Albert King on the same show.
Oh, man.
With Mendelbaum, which was a really, really good Marin County band. Now, Mendelbaum had been one of the bands we auditioned with. So the bands we auditioned with, we ended up doing bunches of shows with, Black Oak, Arkansas, and the other one. But we were so excited. Black Oak and Black Oak.
Iron Butterfly.
It was Mason Prophet.
Midway. Oh, Mason Prophet's down there. Yeah. There was a third act.
Yeah. So, but B.B. King had a hit at this point called The Thrill Is Gone. So this was shortly after, well, it was actually, Thrill Is Gone was the #1 hit. And America, B.B. King had been around a long time, but America was now, and particularly the young people. I mean, B.B. King was the man. Albert King has always been the sharp-edged, player he is. Right. Now, these two guys weren't friends. In fact, they didn't like each other.
Oh, man.
I can imagine.
And only Bill Graham could have put this together. And, neither B.B. King or Albert King knew anything about psychedelics. They probably smoked weed, everybody, back in the old days. But they were used to playing primarily to African American audiences. They hadn't broken through into this new era. But for us, we were 19 years old, for God's sakes, 19, 20 years old. And we knew what it meant to be on this bill. We knew this was our first night at the Fillmore.
Great poster too.
A great poster. And Satie, this was when Satie and anyway, excuse me, Satie ended up leaving, but these were these collages. Satie was quite a guy. So, you know, the way the Fillmore worked was you had your headliner. Well, who was the headliner going to be? So what Bill did was he alternated them. One night was Albert, next night was BB. Next night was Albert, next night was BB.
I see, yeah.
And that way everybody got a chance to be the headliner. And of course, the music was fabulous. What was most surprising and almost overwhelming is these two, at that point, older African-American gentlemen playing in front of a white, long-haired, pot-smoking young people who just went nuts for these guys. It was overwhelming every night, and they couldn't believe, because they had no idea who they were going to be playing for.
Right.
And acceptance and the adulation and the love of this music. And of course, the Fillmore Lights, you had to do the sides, and the sides were long. You just didn't have to do the back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was a low-hanging ceiling because it was designed to be a Casbah in the 30s. So you had to shoot under the Casbah and with these strips down the ends and then a bigger in the back. And we could do it, and we filled it up. That meant these guys were watching the light show. They'd never seen
yeah.
the light show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
It blew their minds. So it was
Oh yeah, must have been so inspiring for them, and just total perspective shift to be part of that.
And they became a part of it, and they became a big part of it. And after that, they were doing concerts all over the country.
Yeah.
With Fillmore West, we figured there was over 200 feet of a screen you had to cover.
That's right.
Yeah, we did a show just about it.
We did a show just about it because.
So how psychedelic would you make these light shows for somebody like BB King?
Well, that's a very good question, Steve. Not that psychedelic,
right?
You know,
yeah.
A lot of blues, a lot of blue colors, and this is where we used Jake. Jake did graphics, and again, nobody was doing. Jake could make figures go all the way around. They'd start at the ends, and these cartoon characters, as it were, and we would load them in the carousels. Jake would animate them so that, and we had remote on the carousels, slide by slide, and shot at different angles, and we can make these dancing alligators with top hat and joints in their mouth dance along the walls.
Oh yeah.
And bring them right into the back where they meet up with the characters dancing on the.
So they would actually like be animated to kind of walk along the wall.
Yep. And
cool.
And they come together at the back of the stage.
Yeah.
I'm going to show this poster because there's kind of like what you're talking about. These images right here. These guys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You see, that's his drawing.
That's Jake's stuff.
Yeah.
So Bill came to me after one of our shows and said, "I need Jake to do a poster. I need to bring him in." And I went to Jake, and he said, "Of course I'll do it." So he met with Bill, and Bill said, I want something that will bring what you do on the walls to life in a poster."
Yeah.
And he did it. You know, he really did it. And that's me on the right on the horse with my girlfriend, and that's Jake on the left with his girlfriend on the back of the horse. And it's the only Fillmore poster he did. And, you know, a lot of people really love this poster. You know, it was on the left, it was Fleetwood Mac, Tom Rush, and Clover, Lights by Crimson Madness. And that was the last night that Peter Green was with Fleetwood Mac.
That's Peter right there.
Yeah, he had his breakdown in LA that weekend. So little did we know that we would be doing four nights with, and Peter Green, that was his band. He started that band.
Absolutely.
He brought everybody else in. A very sad story, but Peter survived. He only passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he suffered. It wasn't drugs. He suffered from organic brain problems, but yeah, this was Jake's poster. Jake did some other shows, did a lot of posters for us. They're not here, but they're in my book. A lot of Jake's work is in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to get a copy of it.
It's a great poster. I actually went to this concert, the Fleetwood Mac one, and I
wow.
got the poster. They gave me the poster, but they give you when you walk out of the Fillmore, because the next week was Beautiful Day, and then Winterland was Steppenwolf.
Yeah,
you can read that. So that was a three concert poster.
There weren't very many 3 concert posters.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to do this Boss Skaggs? You ready for that one?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. So, cut loose.
All right. So this was big for me for a number of reasons. Number one, Mason Prophet was on the show, and they were one of our audition bands again. And Bill did this over and over and over. Black Oak came up later, and I liked it. I thought it was great because, being a working at the Fillmore was a privilege, but being with these guys, because we were all excited on audition night, and to be back working with them on a real paying night we felt a kinship, a brotherhood, I guess you might say. But when this poster happened, Boz was at the top of his game. It was right when Silk Degrees came out, and all of those songs, We Were Always Sweethearts, and those songs were dominating, absolutely dominating the charts. Now, Boz had been around for a while, and he wrote Somebody Loaned Me a Dime, but he hadn't hit any big time. Well, he's a San Francisco guy, and he was hitting his marks, and I just happened to really like his music. So when we were chosen to do this, Herbie and I, who were the guys who always took the stuff up in the truck and set up, the other guys, for whatever reason, it was always Herb and I, we both wanted to get up there early, and it took a while to drag all that stuff from behind the parking lot up the stairs, for 2 guys to do it. It took a couple hours, get it all set up. And we wanted to be set up when Boz showed up to do his sound check, because we had been told that he was going to do a full run through, because this was big for him. This was the first big hometown show featuring this album. And we sat up there up on the catwalk, got comfortable in some chairs. And for me, it was almost a spiritual experience being in there alone, and Boz running through all these great tunes. I know it sounds kind of mushy.
It might have been his first headline show. You know what I mean? Because he was always kind of a second liner until
we were booking him at colleges.
Yeah, right.
Mills College. So yeah, you're right. And we booked him at the county fair down in Santa Cruz. So if we were booking him, we were small potatoes.
Right.
You're right. This was one of the breakout shows. And it was such a privilege to do those 4 nights. And also with Mason Prophet. And I'll say this about Mason Prophet. They'd never seen a light show before the audition night. And I think this was the 3rd show we did together. And those guys absolutely loved our light show. And at some point, they were watching the Critters, and you could see them. You could see their eyes just open up, and they were watching. And at some point, they just stopped in the middle of the song and said, "People, I want to hear it for Crimson Madness."
That's
awesome.
Yeah, it's the only time I can ever remember that happening, either as a performer or in the audience. So that's a little bit about that show.
Let's see you when you were a young light show artist there.
Yeah, fuzzy boy.
Back in the day,
I was living up in La Honda when that picture was taken.
Beautiful. Now you're like 6'6" or something. 6'7"?
Yeah.
Wow. I could see you were tall in some of the pictures. So you're a big guy, man. Big guy. We'll see that later. Okay. Here's another show that you guys did. The Shauna and I, Elvin Bishop, and Crimson Madness, Tower of Power. So that's a cool poster too.
Yeah, that's a really cool poster.
Yeah. Elvin was Elvin became a good friend when we had our nightclub. Elvin used to love to come down and play Boomers. And Elvin's a great guy, just a fantastic guy. Tower of Power, Bay Area band, and Sha-Na-Na, what can you say?
I see Black Sabbath was there too.
Well, I went to that show, that Black Sabbath, James Gang and Love, which was first Sabbath tour in the West Coast. I mean, first album. It was that, because I was a Sabbath fan. I was a little bit younger. I was like a teenager at that time.
Yeah. Who is that light show? It says Lights by Sputniks or something. I don't know. I can't really tell, but
I'll tell you who it is. Let's see. Crimson Madness and
the other one, Lights.
Spontaneity.
Okay.
Spontaneity. Never heard of them.
I think that's the only show they did.
So
that James Gang show, that was with Joe Walsh.
Yeah, it was Joe Walsh was in the band, and Black Sabbath with Ozzy and Tony, and then Love with Arthur Lee, who's
awesome.
Also great too. I mean, okay, so let's move on. We're out of the Fillmore now. We're going to go to the light show strike. Why don't you talk about that?
Oh, all right.
There they are. So we and all the great light artists are in this picture. Glenn McKay's down there, Jerry Abrams, and all the light artists. We didn't get paid very much, and there I am with it's sort of in the middle, the tall guy.
That's you right there.
Yeah, and we all liked each other. We were all friends, and we had respect for each other, with the exception of Little Princess 109 a little bit. But I mean, they were good guys. But we all collectively decided we needed to form an organization, because Bill wouldn't put a show on. Neither would Chet Helms, without a light show. So we were a big part of the deal, and we were getting next to nothing, like $150 a night or $100 a night.
Some things never change.
Well, and that's true. But I mean, it was different. Bill Graham was making a lot of money,
right?
And my relationship with Bill was good because he loved our show, and he was good to us. He did his birthday party for me. My 21st birthday was at the Fillmore, and he had to make a big cake, and we all put cake in each other's face, and we played basketball. There were these great basketball games against the Fillmore, and the bands and the light shows we played. So I was part of the family, but what happened, and all the other light artists were too, but we needed more money because the equipment was expensive and gas and everything. We needed to make some money.
Sure.
So we organized the guild, and now remember, Bill was from New York, and Bill's history, I won't go into it, but he was an orphan, Holocaust survivor, and it cut his teeth on the streets of New York. And when Bill went into New York mode, there wasn't anybody that could top him. And we basically said, well, here's what we want, or we're not going to do any more shows, period. And we're not going to pick it, but we're going to make it, we're going to get into the press. People love the light shows, and we need some money. Not a lot, $200 a night, I think was what we were asking for, maybe $225. So we went out in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the busy season. And the only ones that scabbed were Little Princess 109. And we were out for 2 months. So they got all the shows for 2 months.
Oh, wow. So it went on for 2 months.
Yeah, went on for 6 weeks to 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Finally, and Raleigh was on the negotiating committee with Bill. And we were doing Tahoe at the same time as the strike was going on in the summer. And I would come down with Raleigh for these negotiations with Bill. Now, I didn't go in the meetings, but I would be outside the office, and you could hear Bill from 6 blocks away. It's no good. Yeah. Banging the table. Oh, it was a trip. We'd get scared somebody was going to get hurt, but in the long run, we and Chet wasn't any better, to be honest with you.
Chipmunk,
or Chet Helms. He was.
Chet.
Yeah, he was. he went where Bill went. So, but eventually it happened, and it was good. But this is the whole group of us. This was in the
Yeah,
Chronicle.
can we go through the names of the people there?
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Number one is Glenn
That's
McKay.
Brad McKay.
Four is Jerry Abrams.
Let's see.
And
That's Glenn right there, number one.
that's
Yeah.
Glenn. Yeah. As far
That's
as
Jerry too.
Yeah, that's two is Jerry.
Okay.
Vince is three.
Oh,
Okay.
And Raleigh is up and to the left, my partner, with the hat
here.
on and the Fu Manchu mustache.
I'm looking. Up to the left, huh?
Down, first row.
Oh, first row. Oh, right
But
here.
there, that's Raleigh.
Okay, I got you.
And Vince is the guy I told you, I think number three. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but that's
Yeah.
cool, man. I mean, I'm glad we got. Oh, thanks to Pooters for the shot.
oh yeah,
Us to use it. We really appreciate it.
right. Yeah,
Light show site if anybody wants to go on.
Yeah. Pooters Psychedelic Light Show Index. It's
Okay.
one of the best sites out there.
So now you've got out of San Francisco and you've become your own promoter at your own venue, right? Venues.
Yeah. Well, after Bill closed, I will say that Bill picked us for one or two of the last nights of the Fillmore. Everybody got a shot. His favorite light shows.
Right.
The fans.
Uh-huh.
We did, I think, a beautiful day,
Mhm.
and we were real pleased to be picked for one of the last nights.
Mhm.
So, but when it closed up, we closed down the light show. There wasn't really any future in it for us. And but
You know,
go ahead.
But before
71.
but before we move on, to the
Yeah.
next thing, what were the repercussions of the light show strike? Did you guys get more money? And then
yeah.
I've also heard that it kind of made Bill a bit weary of light shows afterwards.
Well, it did, and everybody could kind of see that there was change in the wind,
Yeah.
and the concerts had gotten. Bill wanted to do something else besides that. He ended up building Shoreline Amphitheater down in Mountain View. That was his,
that was him.
that was him.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and Winterland was shut down. And the places where he was doing shows were old. The Longshoremen's Hall. These were old places. And
yeah.
Bill got into production with M&M Productions, and he was doing the Rolling Stones tours, and he was doing real big tours. And he had bigger plans, and Fillmore was a pain in the ass, to be honest.
Well, he did his he had Winterland going throughout the 70s. I'll just cap it real quick because I'm a historian on all this. And they had to use 4 or 5 spotlights, and so you got to pay union guys or a guy to run it, and the spotlight costs money to rent. And there goes the light show budget. And there was no doubt eventually it got, and then he ended up going to Berkeley Community Theater, Oakland Coliseum, the Cow Palace, same thing, got him a ton of spotlights. And then Day on the Green, with 5 headliner bands during the day, no light shows. So it just changed, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked about this in some of our other episodes, and the whole nature of everything changed, and bringing a light show as the venues get bigger, it's harder and harder to bring something for the size of the Fillmore to an arena.
So let's talk about this Homer's Warehouse. I was not aware of that venue down in Palo Alto. That's awesome, man.
Well, it's across the street from Stanford, and Raleigh and I wanted to stay in the business. We made tons of good contacts. I mean, we worked with all these bands, and we got to and we learned, and we'd been promoting music before we started doing the light shows. So we were itching to do something else, and there was no music. Palo Alto's a university town. There really wasn't much music. There was a couple of small clubs, but there was a biker bar called Homer's. And it was back next to the railroad tracks in an old grain warehouse that had been converted to a place where there was like music. It was big, you could hold 300 people, but it was pretty funky. And you didn't go in there. I mean, it literally was a Hell's Angels bar. And so Raleigh and I went in there just to see. We were looking for a venue, and so we went over there one night, and it was back in an alley, poorly lit by the railroad tracks off El Camino, and there was a sign on the door. We could hear the music. There was a sign on the poster on the door. A little poster that said, "Tonight and Saturday, the Doobie Brothers."
Oh, right.
The original Doobie Brothers, unknown, unrecorded biker band, and so we went in, paid 50-cent door charge, and it was funky, but it was doable. And so I got the manager's phone number from one of the waitresses, and 2 weeks later, Palo Alto Times, patron stabbed at Homer's, police shut it down.
Oh.
And the guy wasn't killed, but with an ice pick, and on the ramp going to the front door. We immediately called. We saw it as an opportunity, and we immediately called the owner and said, "Hey, we'd like to take it over if the city will let you open it up." And he said, "Well, it's not going to be immediate, but call me back in a couple of weeks." And we did. And he said, the city said they didn't pull our license. So we signed a year lease. We put $15,000 into it to clean it up, started booking bands, and lo and behold, Jerry found out about it, and he was looking at a venue. He was looking for venues to do his new bluegrass band, Old and in the Way, with S.R. Clemens and Peter Rowan and John Kahn. And we weren't bluegrass fans, but if Jerry's name was going to be on it, we were in, and we did one of the very first shows Old and in the Way ever did in public.
Wow.
Was at Homer's. And of course, that put us on the map.
Okay, here we go.
It's all in the book. There we go. And next thing, we were cooking along. We were bringing in. There was another Joe or Merle and Jerry. I think Merle and Jerry did 2 or 3 shows, and Old and in the Way did 2 or 3 shows. Old and in the Way only did 20 shows live, or maybe 22, 23. Wow. And some of the songs on the album were recorded at Homer's. And that's where I became friends with Osley, because Osley was doing all the sound. And he would come in and completely take over the warehouse and bring all his gear and giving orders, marching orders. And we actually broadcast that show using Stanford's Under the Atlantic educational cable, and broadcast Old and in the Way to Czechoslovakia.
Oh, no way.
Live.
Fantastic.
Oh man, that's awesome. I'm Czech actually.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, it was
awesome.
It was behind the Iron Curtain.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. And Copperhead, John Cipollina.
Right, Copperhead, Stoneground,
Stoneground, and that was Stoneground was Corey Lirios. That's on that picture. Corey is the guy with his mouth open on the left. So we went from Together to Stoneground to Pablo Cruz with David Jenkins.
And Sal Valentino was also the leader from Bull Brummos.
Yep. And
just to get back. And one of these, the Mad Brothers, they were a band out of San Mateo that I.
Yeah, and I ran. It's funny. One of them read my book and found me, and came over to my house. And real nice guy. And this was just a few years ago. And he said, "Oh man, we're so excited to be at Homer's Warehouse, and it was such a joy for us." And Asleep at the Wheel, of course, Ray Benson has gone on to win many Grammys and keeps Western Swing alive. And he was one of the announcers on KQED's History of Country Music. And he's a real good friend. We're still buddies. And Floyd Domino down there in front. They were our house band, and we do Wednesday nights with Asleep at the Wheel and 50-cent spaghetti. And I met Willie through Ray. Again, these stories are all in the book, but it took Austin.
All right, let's go to your college promotion. Then we're going to hit the Willie section here because we're rounding an hour right now.
Okay. So me and Raleigh each had our own production companies, but we helped each other. So I was doing shows at the Stanford Theater in Palo Alto, and Raleigh was doing some shows there and some college shows, but we'd always help. So this one on the left was a show that Raleigh did at Cupertino at De Anza College, and Jerry Garcia Band featured Nicky Hopkins for a very short time. Of course, Nicky of the Rolling Stones
Right.
fame and Exile on Main Street. And Ron Tutt was Elvis's old drummer. And John Conn, the great bass player, Jerry's close friend. So we did that show and Jake did the poster, beautiful poster. And
he did both of them, or the one on the right?
It's the Jerry Garcia one right here. This one.
Oh, he did that one. Wow, that wizard's really cool.
Yes, that wizard cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Jake got better and better.
For some context, what were the names of your production companies?
I was Half Gaff Productions. See on the right there, the little logo up in the top left.
Oh yeah,
right. Fish with a gaff in the top.
Yeah, the life save. Yeah.
And Raleigh's was Raleigh Grogan's production. What do you call it? Raleigh Grogan's Production Services.
Oh, okay.
It's right at the bottom. It's kind of running off the screen. I'm sorry, I chopped it off.
And that Sons, that was that Sons show.
Yeah, the Sons were great, weren't they? I love that band.
Sons were so good. And my favorite.
Yeah, they were so good. So they were so progressive.
And that was Pablo Cruz's one of their very first public shows. Was this show?
They made it pretty big too. You know, they had some.
They did. They still work too. I mean, Corey went on to make a lot of money in television doing, music for shows.
Was he the bass player singer, Corey, or was he the?
No, he's the piano player and singer.
Okay, the piano. Okay, all right.
And the guitarist was David Jenkins.
Right. Okay, let's go to your Willie thing. Here we go. So tell us about this one.
So this picture on the right is the time I met Willie. I met Willie in Hawaii. And it was called the first Aloha picnic. Now, my best friend from Palo Alto, who we'd been bus drivers together, I got on the job with the wheel, and Willie hired him. So he'd been with Willie for a year when Maynard called me and said, "I want you to come over to Hawaii and meet Willie." And I did, because Willie had heard about me. And so I went up to Hana and got him some weed with my friend who was a grower up there. And I brought him a quarter pound of weed, and we hit it off immediately. And Willie invited me along for the Stardust tour and tours after that. But this day was really a great day. Charlie Daniels Band, Willie Nelson, Pure Prairie League, and Body Rate. And he dosed everybody with psilocybin before the show. So we all had smiles on our face. And it was, it was first interaction with Willie.
There's Bonnie Raitt right there.
And Bonnie, there's Bonnie, big smile. And Charlie Daniels, bass player there. This is when, at the end of the show, when everybody was on stage.
Oh, the big jam, yeah.
The big jam. And that great big banyan tree there, you'll appreciate that. The chapter in the book's called Under the Banyan Tree for this. On the left is, I did the Leon Russell tour as well. And that's somewhere on the road with Leon. And, Willie wrote a book after my book. He had to sign off on my book. And he kind of poo-pooed my book, but he actually loved it. And 2 years later, his memoir came out. And he used a bunch of pictures that I own, but I didn't care. I saw it as a compliment. And so Leon had been one of my favorite artists ever. I mean, and to be able to tour with Leon was a huge thrill for me. And that backstage pass there's a story in the book about that, but that was one of the picnics, and those were some great times.
Okay, let's go to the Willie Nelson Tahoe crew here, correct?
Well, on the left, you have Willie Nelson's crew. On the right, you have the backstage crew at Harris Tahoe. And we started doing a lot of casinos when I was with Willie. Las Vegas, Harris, and those stories are a lot of fun. The way we got treated, a bunch of cowboy hippies, dope smokers, but
so that's you right there, huh?
That's me next to Willie. I was second base. Willie
There's
was,
Willie right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
yeah. And so we would play these softball games, and they were serious. Willie likes to win. And we would play all day, and the Hells Angels hijacked the bus on the way back to Harris, and that's a great story. So yeah, it's just crazy. Threw the bus driver off and took off. We were all drunk, and oh my God. So I don't know how we survived some of this stuff, but those ball games. Now, down the bottom to the left is Grady Martin. He was Elvis's studio guitarist, one of the very best. He toured with Willie for a while. Down the bottom of the left, the guy with the hat. That's
Right here?
Grady Martin.
I see.
And great days. So that picture on the top right is coming off of the Leon Russell tour back home. I had my Shoko t-shirt on, and
Oh yeah.
my son and my daughter on my lap. Yeah, Shoko. They did everybody. And,
Right.
and that poster down below there, that's one of Jake's early work, and I used that picture of me, rendering of me from the poster on the cover of my book.
Yeah, right. And so let's go back to that book here. So I put this liquid in here, some Crimson Madness liquids, and
Great.
there's your book again. So
There it
is
is.
there a place you can order it online or something?
Yeah, you can order it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble online. You can go into your bookstore and order it. I like people to promote their local bookstores. So yeah, it's just Google California Slim, and it'll tell you every place you can buy. It's available everywhere.
Awesome.
If the store doesn't have it, they'll be happy to order it for you.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
awesome.
why don't we go back to the three of us?
And it took you 10 years to do it.
It took me 10 years. I wrote
Wow.
I wrote 1,000 pages, and I had to bring it down to 380. And
Yeah.
Wow, that's tough.
You did all the editing. You did all the editing yourself.
Well, that's a great question, Steve. You're a very observant man. I could have never done that myself.
Yeah, that's.
I hired, Scott Fitzgerald, the writer, had a saying that editing is like killing off your babies or your darlings.
Your darlings, yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah.
And it is. But I found this wonderful editor up in the El Cerrito. It took us 2 years to edit it from 1,000 pages
Oh,
down
wow.
to 80, side by side.
And it's just probably wise. Yeah, it's just wise to get somebody else to do it for you, because it's those decisions must be pretty hard to make, especially when you've got 1,000 pages. And yeah, that's a very good the Scott Fitzgerald quote. That's a very good way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
All right, hey, let's
We
sign
had a
off,
lot of
guys.
fun doing it.
We're at our limit here.
Okay.
All right.
So anyway, Andrew, hey, it was really nice meeting you, man, and
Yeah, man.
great stories, fantastic, man.
Well,
Hey, what about this machine?
Oh yeah, tell us about the
Well, you got to tell us about the machine,
the Infinity Machine.
Infinity Machine, right? Yeah,
That was
Oh my God.
that was David and John, the two twins from New York. That was their brainstorm, and they worked on it. And we finally got it going. But it was really based on a kaleidoscope with mirror pieces. But instead of one rotating cylinder, they actually had two rotating cylinders, and they had it. So the light was in the back, but the way they had the refractors on it, the light would get bigger as it went towards the middle of the tube, and then tighter as it came back. So you had double rotation. You had light that could be shot from an angle, narrow to wide to narrow, and it had lenses in the front. So there wasn't.
So was it like a tube, and the light?
It was a tube.
It was a tube. Okay.
Yeah.
With two counter rotating kaleidoscopes inside of it.
Yes.
Oh
and then
wow.
a really, really powerful light source in the back,
Yeah.
I assume. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And then a lens to focus out, right?
Yeah.
Lens to focus out.
Oh man.
Yeah, it
Very
was
cool.
It was very cool. Yeah. And so-
Okay, well, we know because I'm
You know.
really excited about that machine here. I wonder where it is today. Who knows?
Somebody's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of stuff, what about the films from, like, let's say, like the feedback and all that? Is that stuff still around, or is that lost to history?
It's lost. We tried to archive as best as we could, but it's all a memory at this point. It's
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
And hey, thanks for getting the pictures and stuff, because we really worked on that, and it worked out. I think the show looks pretty good, and
I'm very
Yeah.
impressed with
there
what
was
you
enough
did.
stuff to pull it off. So
Yeah. Thank you.
it worked well for us. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for coming on the show. Really enjoyed talking with you and hearing your stories. I'm looking forward to reading the book. So,
Good.
yeah, really cool.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
guys very much as well.
Yeah, really appreciate it, man. Thanks for sending me a copy of the book too.
Bet.